So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. The commandments is that actually they are the command to take the standpoint of those 7 days. Because when we were going through the example of how to work out a life problem, we said, and if we do so-and-so, then such and such. And if we do so-and-so, then such and such. Huh? And we based that, that was all rooted in the days of creation. Now the commandments say, okay, do it. Go on and do that. Make that your standpoint. Take that standpoint. See, that's the crux. The days of creation give us a presentation of the Word. The commandments also give us a presentation of the Word. The Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer give us a presentation of the Word. What is the difference? The days of creation actually show us the Word as the Word as the Word. That is, what the creative process is. It's the awakening within us of what that creative process is. The commandments then show us the Word as the Christ. And what does the Christ do? The Christ is that which always makes a demand on us, which asks us to do something. And so we get the demand to take that standpoint of the Word as the Word. The Beatitudes actually bring out a tonality of the Word as Christianity. Why? Because they show us what the reward is, what the blessing is, if we take that standpoint. If we are true to the Word and to the Christ, then we get the outcome or the result in Christianity. And finally, the Lord's Prayer would show us those 7 statements as correlating again with the days of creation, but in a sense that shows those 7 as the fundamental facts of being. That's the Word as science. So going back to the commandments, then, we should be able to see in those 7, the commandments have a very important thing to say. They are showing us the crux of the whole issue. Do you actually take those 7 days as your standpoint? Because so often in science, we may be tempted to stay at the standpoint of the Word as the Word, where we have seen these things, we love them, we say, but we love them from a heady sense. We love them not in the sense of taking them in and conceiving of them, giving birth to them, but we love them as a letter. We say, yes, that actually is the way it is. But the Word, as the Christ says, all right, then make that your inner experience. Take that in. Make it your attitude. actually deal with everything in your life with that method. Don't just go home this week and say, yes, wasn't that wonderful what we saw, and yes, I know that is the only answer. But do something about it. Identify yourself with it. Always when you identify yourself with it, just as in, if you know that order, that Genesis order, you know that the Christ comes in at the point of soul as soul, where you do get that identity, that subjectivity, with the idea. So let's look at those commandments and see what demands they make on us. We have the first statement. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. What do you suppose we have here as the command of mind? Go to God, yes. Yeah. It isn't just saying, I am the light, is it? It's saying, I'm the light. I'm the one that can save you. I'm the mind that can save you. Remember me. Don't forget me. Turn to me. See? Turn to that one mind. That's the only thing that can save you from an Egypt experience, from a darkness experience. Egypt was always a symbol of darkness, of the counterfeit of mind, of having to deal with that sense of a lack of light, of not knowing what the light is. And here it says, if you want to come out of that Egypt, that darkness, turn to that one mind. That's what can save you. When we come to the second commandment, what is the second commandment?
I am the only.
It's thou shalt have no other gods before me, which means what? Yeah.
That I am the only.
I'm the only, and what would that be as a command, as a demand to us?
Separate yourself from any other conception.
Yeah, I'm the only. Don't have any other. Don't turn to any other. Turn to that one mind and don't turn to any other mind. Don't look to any other source of information. Don't go to any other Savior except that one mind. That's the only thing that can save you. It isn't only a saving power, it is the saving power. It is the only salvation. So it says that's the only one. When we come to the third commandment, we get something quite different. We get that commandment that asks us not to make any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. How do you suppose this is a soul tone? Why is this soul?
No false identity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Whenever we see that symbol of idolatry or graven image, it's an indication of a false identity, isn't it? False identity of God. To have an idol or a form that is not identical with God. That would be the Old Testament way of saying a false identity. And here the third commandment says, don't have a false identity of God. Don't have a false identity of anything that is in the heaven above. False identity of mind. Don't identify spirit falsely. Don't have a false identification of soul, of principle, of life, truth, and love, or of anything that belongs to their realm, of any idea. In other words, don't you try to identify the absolute. And don't have a false identity of man either. False identity of anything that is in the earth beneath. In other words, don't identify the relative falsely. What did we have? Columns 1, 2, and 3, the absolute, says, don't identify those three falsely. And the relative were the last 4 columns, weren't they? Or the next 3 columns. Don't identify those falsely. Have a true identity, just as we've seen this week. Keep that true identity. And finally it would say, don't make any false identity of that which is under the earth, the water under the earth. Don't identify error falsely. Don't identify the counterfeit falsely. That we can only have a true identity, a true identification of every level, if we start with the identity of the synonymous term itself. We start with the identity of God itself. We usually goof up the most in the third respect, don't we? We try to identify the counterfeit. If we have a physical problem, or whatever the problem is, that we try to identify what it is that needs to be taken care of. It says, if you want to identify error rightly, even error, if you want to identify error rightly, start with the true identity, the identity of God. It's really those 3 degrees, isn't it, that we get in the textbook on page 115 and 116. The next statement, of course, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, gives you a further sense of the soul sense, of not being in bondage to that false identification, that if we start with the identity of God and deduce everything from that, we get the freedom of soul, don't we? We get the freedom of soul instead of the bondage of the senses. And then we come to a funny little statement that says, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. What do you suppose this means? Let me help you a little bit. This somehow may already be a touch of the 4th statement. It may even be a 3.5 point. What do you think it means?
It could be that he wants to keep it within himself, see if it will propagate.
Good.
Principle
Very good.
will be one with this idea, no matter how long the error occurs, through however many generations, we will never be unavailable or unpresent.
Okay.
Once you make such a grievous error as to misidentify the source of everything and cling to false things, it's going to have long-term bad consequences.
Yes. It actually says that if you don't obey the third commandment, or the second, or the first, that this too has a seed within itself. That there's a principle working in the positive and in the negative. Isn't that what we see with divine cybernetics? 2 minutes? I just happen to have that chart here. Isn't that what we see with the divine cybernetic model? That if we go with the divine nature, that we experience what we call a positive feedback, that has a seed within itself. And that if we don't go with the divine nature, that too has a seed within itself. It will visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children until the third and fourth generation. That is, until you change your standpoint. You see? I'm a principle. What we see here, I'm that self-organizing, self-regulating principle, which is ever-operative, which is omni-operative, which is operating everywhere, and I work on you. Either I work on you positively, and I work on you in the realm of the negative too. There's no realm outside of my realm.
Isn't there a chapter in Science and Health that has that same idea? Is it Atonement in Eucharist? Where she raises hell with the reader as to what's going to happen if you don't live right.
Well, Atonement in Eucharist is the Word is the Christ chapter. And so you do feel some sense of correlation here because we have the Word as the Christ, which the commandments would bring out that same tonality. In fact, when Max Kapler goes through the first 4 chapters, he sometimes refers to the days of creation, the commandments, the Beatitudes, and the Lord's Prayer. So, yes. But we see that there's nothing outside. This level of Christian Science includes the last 4 categories, doesn't it, that we've been looking at. Say even the 7th category is not outside. There actually is no below the chart. You know, sometimes we joke and we say, oh, that's below the chart. That's not in the chart. Everything is in the chart. Everything is in the chart. And there's just that one principle which is working at every level, whether it appears to be column 7 or not. It's just the one identity at work. And that principle will work on us and work on us until the 3rd and 4th generation, until we change our standpoint and come into alignment with that principle. Then we get a new input into the whole system, and the whole thing just goes on and on and on in a spiraling upward advancement of one's understanding. It's exactly what we've seen in the layout, isn't it? Just take a synonymous term here. For example, truth. Isn't that what we saw, that this column has no identity of its own? Column 7 has no identity of its own. It's only the principle working on us to bring us back into identity with the absolute standpoint. Whether we experience the so-called negative feedback or if we experience the positive feedback. It's just one principle.
That's how I operate until you correct it, until you correct your standpoint, until the third and fourth generations. When you get to the fourth generation, when you are identified with principle, when you reach principle, then the whole thing changes. And so the second statement then, or the second aspect of that principle, is the fourth statement that says, until the third and fourth generations, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. That principle appears to be a merciful, operative principle the moment we come into line with the commandments of that principle. So first it shows principle does not show mercy. Principle does not pardon. That it cannot pardon wrongdoing. That it demands correction. That as long as you sin and that sin of the third is not corrected, it will go on. Sin, too, has the seed within itself. That it will go on and on and on, but only because there's a principle at work behind it all that won't pardon it. But that the moment you come into line with that principle, you get the mercy of it.
Well, this is the point where that Christian Scientists bogged down, not going into the principle. This 3.5, right? And I can't quite understand why we do get bogged down there. It seems to me, why wouldn't we go on? Now, what keeps us in the 3.5? Is it just not knowing this?
I guess it is that sense of oneself as an ego.
Oh. Right. We get all taken up. We have mind, spirit, soul, and we're all inflated now. Personal sense must come in.
We think that's ours.
We've done a good job.
And that we can use that.
Yeah, okay.
That we can make that work and do something for us.
Okay, all right.
And when it seems to be difficult to give up that false identity of ourselves, that we think we are the ego, that the whole universe centers around us, and that we can make that principle work for us. See? And let's just quickly recap those first 3 or 4 commandments. That first commandment is really telling us to turn now to everything that we've seen about the divine nature. Turn to me. That you've seen that nature, you've somehow gotten a big vision of it this week, but don't leave it there. Turn to that one mind. And secondly, have that as your only mind. Have that as the only vision that you entertain within you. So that you love that above everything else. That there's just a constant attitude within you to have no other gods before that one me, which is spirit. And thirdly, that therefore identify everything according to that vision, in alignment with that vision, out from that vision. And that if you identify everything correctly in the spiritual realm, that will take care of the human. It will identify everything in the relative realm, and it will take care of the counterfeit. It will identify even error properly, so that you have the identity principle within you. And the fourth says, or that 3.5 point really says, that you see then that there's just one principle operating, and that principle has the seed within itself. that if you identify yourself with it, you get the positive results of that principle, you get the demonstration of that principle. If you don't identify yourselves with it, that's what we would call sin, of deviating from that identity or that principle, and that too has the seed within itself, namely that it will reproduce and reproduce those false results or that phenomena of column 7 until you go back to column 1, until you begin and come out from 1, 2, 3. So that the fourth says that the moment we do that, the moment we reach that fourth generation or that standpoint of principle, that then that principle shows mercy. And what is the mercy of the principle? It's the fact that when we come into obedience with it, it demonstrates itself, but it demonstrates itself as what we now perceive as the harmony of that principle. So principle demands obedience. Obey that one principle, and then you will perceive that mercy to be the mercy that floods in onto the human scene of columns 4, 5, and 6. It's just as with any other subject. If we are in the realm of mathematics or in the realm of music or whatever it is, that we have to align ourselves with the principle of that subject. That if we don't, then we perceive our experience within that realm as one of discord. But the moment we come into line with that principle, we somehow interrelate and move harmoniously within that whole realm and get the true result. So that I, the Lord, am a jealous God really means that principle does not allow any disloyalty, does not allow any unfaithfulness to go on, that it demands that identity with the principle. That brings us to the fifth statement. The fifth statement is, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain." So what is the demand here?
Not taking it for granted, I don't know.
Not taking it for granted, of not taking it seriously. See? It's not taking it casually, yes?
No,
Yeah, don't take it in vain. Don't take it casually. Take it seriously, in other words. Put everything into it. Give. Yeah. Yeah, don't just talk about it. It isn't just words, it's your life, isn't it? It's life itself. So take it seriously, give everything to it, consecrate everything to it. It's a sense of our consecration, of our deepest devotion, that we want to give everything now to what we've seen this week. That we don't just casually think about it once in a while, but that we entertain it all the time, that we begin to carry it around with us every day, that we begin to have a sense of consistency in our lives, that we feel that this is the biggest thing, the most important thing, that I want to give everything to it. I want to give my time, I want to give my energies, I want to give my best abilities, my best qualities, the whole quality within me to seek, to research, to love it, to care for it, to identify with it, to be obedient to it. All those qualities. That it's a sort of a further sense of putting those first things first. It has a life-ish sense to it, because it means that we give back the fullness of being to being. See, that we reflect the fullness of being by expressing that quality towards our subject. And we don't take the name of the Lord in vain. We don't take that divine nature, we don't take those 7 in vain. It becomes then our life, doesn't it? If we put all of that into it. It isn't just a part of our life. It's the fullness of our life. And then it isn't just empty words or vain words. So we get here a sense of the consistency of life. Consistency in that it becomes habitual to us to put everything into it. It becomes habitual to us to rely on that principle. There's another slightly different aspect of not taking it in vain, that for every aspect of our lives, we go to that principle. We rely on it. This is really a quality that comes out in the chapter on prayer at the 5th subject. It shows that honesty of the 4th subject, where everything within us is lined up with principle, shows itself forth at the point of life as a consecration to that principle, that principle is the principle for everything in our lives. Not just when we conveniently need it or want to turn to it, but always in every situation. Can you hear the life tone? Then we come to the 6th. And the 6th says, remember the Sabbath. Isn't that funny? The 6th says, remember the 7th. To keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. What would the command be here? That 6th day is the day of wholeness, isn't it?
It means that we should, understand what what all the synonyms are, the principle. That would be the fullness.
Yes, that's the wholeness, isn't it? That those 7 are the wholeness of being. So it's remember the Sabbath, remember those 7. Don't forget those 7. They are the wholeness. And what does it say then? 6 days shalt thou labor. Work with those 7. Work with those 7. Don't work in any other way. Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. That as we work with those 7, as we work with the vision that we've seen this week, I like to take it back to that whole vision that we've seen, that leads us then to the consciousness of the 7th day, that nothing else can. So it's work, work, work with those 7 synonymous terms, and don't work in any other way. Work until you reach the consciousness of wholeness. Wholeness is always a question of all 7 synonymous terms. So work with all 7. Don't just work with mind, and as some students in the beginning do, spend a year with mind and never look at spirit or soul or principle or life or truth or love. Then spend another year with spirit. So work with all of them. And so often it happens that when you work, you somehow only get to the point of the 3rd or to the point of the 4th or the 5th, and then you stop. Something happens, you get interrupted, or you need to do something else. Everybody's smiling, you know this. So it's the 6th commandment that says, You have to work with all 7 of them. But that's the wholeness. That's the completeness. That fills out the whole picture. And that then brings us to the consciousness of the 7th day. And we can see what the 7th commandment has to say about that 7th day. Here's the commandment that reads, "But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, etc. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested on the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." So it's, the 7th is different from the 6th. The 6th says, work, work, work. The 7th says, don't work anymore. It's the demand upon us to have that consciousness of fulfillment, of completeness, of the realization that everything is at the point of perfection, that if we work according to those 7, that is the standpoint of perfection, and that we don't have to go on working and bolstering that up and beefing it up in some way as though it could not be perfect, as though it could fall away from perfection. But once we've seen the wholeness of being, once we've attained a consciousness of wholeness, we've got to rest in that. So the 7th commandment says, rest in that consciousness. Rest in that wholeness. And don't try to improve God's work. Accept that everything is. Everything is perfect. Don't let there be a single detail within you that is at unrest. See? That's thou, neither thou, nor thy servant, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant. See, anything within that realm, anything within your realm, anything within the realm of your consciousness. Don't let there be a single thing within you that is not at peace in that whole picture. It is not resting in that. Because there's nothing that we can do to improve that perfection, is there? The perfection of that 6th day. So often we work and we think then we have to somehow step in and do something or interfere, help being out, help get the show on the road. And so it seems to be the most difficult thing for the human mind to take this 7th standpoint, to accept that command, to rest in it. The 7th day was that God rested. Now you rest. You have to reflect the divine nature. That stranger within our gates, or that little doubt within us, that may not have yet accepted the full consciousness of science, that we don't allow that we don't allow anything within us to work, that everything must be at a standpoint of rest. It's, of course, not a sense of apathy here. It's not a sense of just laying back and, letting it happen.
With a sense of rest, like
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah.
time, but I.
Yes, yeah. And of realizing that it's God's plan that's being worked out, too. That it's not our plan, it's not my plan that's being worked out. It's the divine plan. Because that does sneak in, doesn't it? If we don't see the results that we expect, you know, in a situation, then we think it's not working. It must not be working. I have to add something to it. I have to give something more to it. And love says, no, that's the consciousness of all. That's the consciousness of all there is, and that is working, and it's working out my plan and not your plan, my design, not what you think should happen. So those would be the commandments. Gives us a very different sense of the commandments than we've had before, doesn't it? Very different sense than we got in the church or in the Sunday school. You can see why Mrs. Eddy wanted the children to have the Bible teachings, what she really meant by that desire, for the children to be taught in the Sunday school those Bible teachings.
Thank you. Bye-bye.